Okay, people, I believe it is show time. Today is Wednesday, November 11. What do we have in mind? Well, Monday is already passed. Monday finished lecturing on Chapter 12, Development 2. Also on Monday, I reminded the class that there's a written test available for you to complete. At your leisure, more or less, written test on Chapter 12, Kohlberg and Moral Development. It's based on my lecture on Kohlberg's theory. It involves, some of you have likely already completed it. You open it up, and among other things, you'll read a description of a person who's facing a moral dilemma. You'll read about how he resolved that moral dilemma and what his reasoning was. Based on his reasoning, it'll be your job to indicate whether you believe he's operating at level 1, pre-conventional level of moral reasoning, level 2, conventional, or level 3, post-conventional. You'll choose the level you think he's at, and you'll defend your answer. You'll tell me why you think he's operating at whatever level you chose. It is due this Sunday night, 11-ish, this coming Sunday night. It is worth 10 points. It's not in assignments. Instead, the place to look for it is in Canvas quizzes. Log in Canvas, go to Site 100, go to Canvas quizzes. That'll be due this Sunday night. For today, what we are going to do, I'm going to begin lecturing on the next unit. The next unit is Chapter 13, Intelligence, and Chapter 14, Personality. This unit's going to be handled a little bit differently than a typical unit. We will not have a test on it 1 week from today. Instead, because I'm combining 2 chapters into 1 unit, I'm going to start lecturing on that unit today. I'll lecture on it more on Monday. I will lecture on it more on Wednesday, and then you'll take your multiple choice quiz on this unit the following Monday. I believe that's Monday just before Thanksgiving, if my memory is right. In the Canvas module, you should be able to download the study guide. Go to the Canvas module for this week. You should be able to download the study guide that tells you what you need to worry about when reading Ettinger's textbook. As always, the study guide will point out what's relevant in Ettinger's textbook, but not necessarily what's relevant in my lecture. There are not any blanked out lecture notes for this unit. Instead, I'll show my notes on the document camera, and you'll take notes at home as you watch Echo 360 or here in class with your laptop in front of you. So that's the first half of today, lecturing on, I'm actually going to start with Chapter 13, Intelligence. Second half of today, you'll do the multiple choice quiz on Chapter 12, Development 2, Adolescence through the End of Life. As is the case with all the multiple choice quizzes, it's worth 30 points. It only has 20 items on it. Some of the items worth 1 point each, and some of the items worth 2 points each. I plan to begin at somewhere around 1:35 p.m. Once you begin, you'll have 45 minutes to complete it. And again, we plan on beginning at somewhere around 1:35. And that's all my announcements for today. People watching an Echo 360. I've already got somebody saying, I cannot hear you. People on Echo 360, why don't you go to the chat panel and post either yes, I can hear you, or no, I cannot hear you. When one person makes posts like that, it may just be that person's having trouble, but if it means everybody's having trouble, there may be something wrong at my end. If you're watching on Echo 360, give me a post, either yes or no. Yes, I can hear you, or no, I can't. I've got another, I can't hear you. I can't hear you, I can't hear you. Shoot. Okay, let me get the picture. Somebody is probably monkeyed with the equipment. I see my microphone is not glowing as it's supposed to glow. Dang. Okay, well, I'm not saying this for the benefit of the people that are watching by Echo 360. Instead, I'm saying it for the benefit of the people here in the room. Class is going to begin late because we're having technical problems. I'll make a note so that people know that I know that I know. Okay, I have posted an item myself. Sorry about the sound issue. Hold on, I will seek technical help. At your second 100 class will start a few minutes late due to technical problems. Okay, folks in classroom, my apologies. We'll get the show on the road and we'll get things fixed. Okay, people in the room, the tech guy is on the way. I'm going to write a note to my students so that they can see that the tech guy is on the way. I can hear now. I can hear you now. You're kidding. Okay. Pose another question to my students. If you can hear me, post and say, I can hear you now. And yes, I'm looking at my posts right now. If you can hear me, say so. I can hear you. Oh, I can't hear you. Tell me either way. I can hear you or I cannot hear you. I can hear you now. I don't know how somebody could post saying I can't hear you because I asked the question orally. How could they know? I can hear you, I can hear you, I can hear you, I can hear you. The only thing worse than tech that doesn't work is tech that you can't count on. You don't know whether it's going to work or not. Okay, people are saying I can hear you. I can hear with some distortion. That's as good as it ever gets. I can hear you, I can hear you, I can hear you. Okay, this is what we're going to do. I plan to go ahead and begin my lecture. The tech guy is on the way anyhow, so I'll have him take a look at things. And we'll plan on having the class meeting as planned. If sound goes out, then give me a post that says I can't hear you. And I'll know, and we'll deal with it some way. If worst comes to worst, I'll go home and make a recording of my lecture and upload it to YouTube so that everybody can see it, or upload it to Echo 360. Sorry for these ongoing hassles. I'm going to go ahead with my lecture, and if my sound is not audible to some people, I will make the lecture available to you one way or another after class. Let's open up a Word. That would be an easier way. Now I'm getting posts from students who say that they can hear me. At the very beginning of class, they said that they could not. I'll let you do what you want to do. Normally, these microphones glow red. This one is glowing red. That one's not. I don't know if that's related to it.
I'm not sure not. Because I don't know. I'm trying to think of which one records the echo audio. They can hear you?
I think so. I'm going to go ahead and post this. I'm just posting something to them. Okay, people, I'm going to go ahead and get started with my lecture. I'm going to keep my eye on the chat panel. If the sound goes away and if you can't hear me, then say so, and I'll try to respond to it in real time in some way. One more time, as long as the tech guy is here, if you can hear me, say so. Post a comment, I can hear you. Just so I know before the tech guy goes. Yeah, do you know what it could be that they could not hear me at the beginning and they can hear me now?
Might have had to do with the schedule for echo. That's a possibility, like it couldn't sync up before the class could start.
I can hear you. I can hear you. I can hear. I can hear you. I can hear. Okay, so it might have been software thing with echo.
Yeah, it could have just been like the startup of the stream.
If it was hardware, it wouldn't have gotten better on its own, right?
Probably not.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, thanks for coming so quick. Okay, thanks for responding. I have been able to hear the entire time perfectly clear. Okay, thanks for responding, people. You don't need to post anymore. I'm going to assume you can hear me. I'm going to do my lecture. If at the end of it, it turns out people could not hear me, let's do it this way. If by the end of it you can't hear me, send me an email and I'll get the lecture to you in one way or another. But let's go ahead and get started while the magic is working. People in classroom, do you guys have any questions, comments, anything I need to know about before we get started today? Today, it's intelligence. Current unit, I indicated, is going to involve two chapters. Chapter on intelligence, chapter on personality. We're going to begin with intelligence. My plan is to cover these topics. I'm going to begin by talking about what is intelligence, and give you kind of an up-close look at what the most widely used individually administered intelligence test is all about, the WACE. I'll say some things about criticisms of IQ testing while the whole thing is controversial. I will lecture on Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, and if time permits, we'll see a video related to that. Eventually, I'm going to talk about the issue of the effect of heredity versus the environment on intelligence. We're going to see there's evidence that intelligence is affected by both heredity and environment. But let's go ahead and get started with definition. Definition for intelligence. It is global capacity of a person to act purposefully, think rationally, and deal effectively with the environment. I like that definition because it's broad. You can see where it applies to human beings and our gut feeling of what intelligence is all about when it comes to human beings. But I like it because it's also relevant to non-human animals. That concept could apply to dogs. It could apply to rats. It could apply to crows. Not today, but at a later class meeting, I plan to show a video that talks about intelligence in crows. So it's a general purpose definition. It will work where human beings are concerned. It'll work where non-human beings are concerned. Now, when most of us think about intelligence, our mind immediately goes to the concept of intelligence quotient. Now, intelligence quotient is not exactly the same thing as intelligence. Intelligence is this abstract concept that we can agree what it's about in the abstract, but people disagree about how exactly we should measure it. The most common way of measuring intelligence for purposes of giving kids guidance in school is to obtain their intelligence quotient, their IQ. IQ is abbreviation for intelligence quotient. It's an estimate of intelligence based on a specific test. And it's important to say based on a specific test because different intelligence tests give slightly different weight to different mental abilities. I want my students to have a concrete sense of what it's like to have an intelligence test administered, what kind of items would be given to you, and I think hopefully that'll also help convey the idea of intelligence. So I'm going to say some things about what is probably the most widely used individually administered IQ test, the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale, which goes by abbreviation the WACE. Now, when I say the most widely used intelligence test, I need to get specific. This is almost certainly not the most widely taken intelligence test. You can go online and take an intelligence test for free. Maybe it'll be a good intelligence test where there's a lot of evidence that it's reliable and valid, or maybe it'll be a flaky intelligence test that somebody just cooked up so they could put it on the internet. But when it comes to individually administered tests, that means you are applying for a position as an executive with a big corporation. It's important enough that they're going to spend a lot of money on the selection process. They have a psychologist administer personality tests to you. Psychologists might administer intelligence tests to you. If so, and if the company has a lot of money, they'll probably use the WAIS. It's expensive to administer because it has to be administered by trained professionals and expensive to interpret, but it's sort of at the top of the heap when it comes to prestige as an individually administered IQ test. As indicated, the WAIS is used with adults. One of the innovations of the WAIS, now the WAIS has been in use for decades. It is largely seen as a better alternative to the other popular individually administered intelligence test, the Stanford Binet. One of the innovations of the WAIS is it not only gives you your overall IQ score, but it also gives you scores on 4 subtests. There is overall IQ, there is your overall level of intelligence, but there's more than one construct that goes into your overall level of intelligence, and those different mental abilities are measured by the 4 subtests. You will not need notes on the next page. The page of notes that I'm about to show to you, don't bother taking notes on it. It'll take you a long time to take notes on it, and there's not going to be any questions specifically on these subtests. But I wanted to give everybody a sense of what it's like to be administered an intelligence test. This is something that I can speak to with some authority. I haven't been given any training on intelligence tests. I'm not qualified to administer the WAIS, but when I was in graduate school, I had a lot of friends that were in clinical psychology, and they needed guinea pigs to practice. They had to learn how to administer the WAIS. They needed guinea pigs to practice, and I volunteered to be their guinea pig. They administered the test to me many times. Years after that, my wife went into graduate school in school psychology. She had to learn how to administer the WAIS, and so I was her guinea pig as well. The WAIS consists of 4 subtests, and notice how the mental abilities measured by these subtests differ. They get at different aspects of your intelligence. One of the most important subtests is the verbal comprehension subtest. This is the aspect of intelligence that's been measured from the beginning, from the first intelligence tests that were developed back in the early 1900s. Verbal comprehension measures verbal comprehension. How good is your vocabulary? How good are you at listening to verbal questions that I ask you and responding to those questions correctly? Verbal comprehension scale consists of items like, what is steam made of? So you're sitting across the table from the psychologist. The psychologist asks you this question. You give a response. She takes notes on what your response is. Later, she'll go back to her office and she'll score your response based on how good it was. There's manuals that tells her this kind of response is worth 1 point, this kind of response is worth 2 points, and so forth. What is steam made of? Another verbal comprehension item is, why is copper often used in electrical wires? Listen to your response, later go back to my office and decide how many points to give you. Now, you don't need notes on that, you don't need notes on this either. But I wanted to mention it so that you get a sense of the different things that go into an IQ score. There is a perceptual reasoning scale. It involves a task like this, block design. After looking at a design, arrange small colored cubes in the same design. The logic behind this is it possible for somebody to be intelligent? Is it possible for somebody to be bright, but not necessarily have a great vocabulary? Maybe this person didn't have the benefit of a good public school system to attend. So their vocabulary is not great, their verbal skills aren't great, but this person is bright. This person is quick on picking up things. That's the kind of skill that this perceptual reasoning scale gets at. You're sitting across the table from a psychologist. She has a bunch of plastic colored cubes in front of her. She arranges the plastic cubes so that they form a red diamond against a white background. She then gives you a jumble of colored cubes. She tells you, I want you to arrange your cubes so that they create the same design that I created in front of me. And furthermore, I'm going to time you. She clicks a stopwatch. and she times me, how long does it take, Larry, to put these color cubes so they look like a red diamond? The idea is the more quickly you can do it, the smarter you are. The more quickly you can do it, the more points you get on this scale. The more quickly you can do it, the brighter you are. And that's going to be a theme that runs through a number of these subtests on the WACE. There's a working memory task. This brings back unpleasant memories. Tasks that assess working memories, such as the digit span task. I'm going to say a list of digits to you. I want you to listen to me, and then I want you to say them back in the same order that I said them to you. 4, 5, 1, 9. So I say it back, 4, 5, 5, 9, 1. Don't be too proud if you did it right, because she's going to make the sequence longer. She adds longer digit sequence, until you start failing and failing reliably. The more digits you can keep in working memory, then the more points you're going to get, the higher your ultimate IQ score is going to be. Another scale that you don't necessarily need notes on, well, same task, even more challenging. Now, I'm going to give you a number sequence. I want you to listen to it and say it back to me, but in reverse order. If I say 2847, you're supposed to remember it and say it back to me as 7482. And again, it keeps making the list longer and longer until I fail reliably at it. We're still talking about scales of the WACE. You don't need notes on this scale either. The WACE has a processing speed scale. There's a digit coding task. You learn a different symbol for each number, and then you fill in the blank under the number with the correct symbol. This is like a decoding task. I'm going to give you a sequence of nonsense syllables, and then I give you a code. I give you the cipher that tells you what letter each of these symbols stand for. I want you to look at the nonsense symbols I gave to you and then use my decoding master decoder in order to decode it. She times me. The more quickly I can do it, the more points I get, the higher my IQ score is going to be. These are the kinds of mental abilities that are measured that go into your score on the WACE, your IQ score on the WACE. Now, that was the part that you did not need to take notes on. Then we come back to the parts where you do want to resume taking notes. Do need notes on the following. One of the reasons I like to lecture on intelligence is I like to talk about those topics in psychology that are controversial, and the whole phenomenon of intelligence and intelligence testing is one of the most controversial phenomena in psychology. Now, when I say controversial, I don't mean all psychologists agree that it's a bad idea, we should not be doing it. I say psychologists disagree with one another. They disagree on a number of issues, and I'm going to talk about the two criticisms that I see most often in the research literature. Criticism number one, and you do want to take notes on this. Criticism number one, there's a lot of professionals who worry that society probably relies too heavily on IQ in making important decisions about individuals. They worry that we've developed this whole IQ testing industry and it has too much power. Let me give you an example of it. This is kind of a representative example. I grew up in West Virginia. If you grew up in West Virginia, as I did in the 1960s, when you got to the 6th grade, you took an academic ability test. Now, it wasn't an IQ test, strictly speaking, and there's a difference between IQ test versus academic ability test, but there's enough similarity that it serves as a good example. 6th grade, you take this academic ability test. The score that you get on that academic ability test is going to have big implications for the kind of life that you're going to lead from then on. If you've got a good score on it, you have a high level of academic ability. When you get to middle school the following year, they'll put you in the college prep track. You've been identified as one of the people that has good academic ability. You're probably going to go to college. So we're going to give you those courses that will help prepare you for college. Things like algebra, algebra 2, trigonometry, creative writing courses, and such. Now, I happen to do well on standardized tests. I got a good score. They put me on the college prep class. I went to college. A lot of good things happened to me. I had a good friend back in West Virginia. In fact, he's still a good friend of mine today, who, for whatever reason, doesn't do very well in standardized tests. He's a real bright guy, but didn't do well in standardized tests. Got a relatively lousy score on this test. So when he went to middle school, he was put on the industrial arts track. That's the track where you take classes like shop classes. The assumption is you're not going to go to college, so we're not going to waste time teaching you algebra and so forth. He found himself in these non-college prep classes. When he got out of high school, he did go to college, but it took him longer. He had to start back with kind of the remedial college classes, and it took him a long time to catch up. He eventually got his college degree. He had a very successful career. I say had because he retired recently. He made enough money that he was able to retire recently. He became a sales representative with a big pharmaceutical corporation, traveling around from doctors' offices and talking about new medications that are out. He makes a lot of money. When I go and visit him, I feel like I'm in a mansion almost. He's kind of a cautionary tale of what can go wrong when we give too much weight to these standardized tests. Because he got a bad score on it, it slowed him down on his road to success. And people worry, should we be giving as much weight to these standardized tests as we are giving? That is criticism number one. Criticism number two is kind of related. It's the worry that most intelligence tests measure only a narrow range of skills. A lot of critics worry that what these IQ tests measure are things like vocabulary, reading comprehension, the kinds of skills that you need to do well in school. But there's a lot of things they don't measure. They don't measure things like how conscientious are you? How detail-oriented are you? How good are your interpersonal relationship skills? These are things that influence how successful you're going to be on your career, but they're not measured by the typical intelligence test. So should we be giving so much weight to something that measures such a relatively narrow range of skills? Now, I don't come down heavily on one side or the other of this argument, but I want you to be aware of these criticisms. Questions so far? People here in the classroom? I'm afraid to look at my Echo 360 chat panel because I don't want to see it if it says they can't hear me again. If they can't hear me, I'm going to have to record this lecture later and make it available to them in another way. I just don't want to know right now. Doing okay here in the classroom? Okay. We're still talking about intelligence testing. On my big outline, we've already made some progress, gave you a definition for it, talked about the most widely administered, individually administered test, the WAIS, introduced you to some of the criticisms of IQ testing. And now I'm going to talk about at least one of the responses to that criticism. I'm going to say some things about Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. And by the way, this theory is also controversial. There's a lot of psychologists that believe theories like this are a good idea. There's a lot of psychologists that believe it's a bad idea. But I want you to be aware of the kinds of ways that psychologists have responded to these criticisms. Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. Some critics say, look, the standard IQ test is too narrow. It just measures things like vocabulary, verbal reasoning skills. We shouldn't call it an intelligence test. We should probably call it a scholastic ability test or something like that. Other psychologists have responded to that. Well, okay, let's define intelligence more broadly. Let's take the position that there's different kinds of intelligence, And maybe we should measure these different kinds of intelligence with different assessment tests. Howard Gardner's theory is probably the most widely known of these responses. Gardner proposes 7 different kinds of intelligence. And in truth, he doesn't limit himself to 7. He says there may be more than 7. But his current version of his theory talks about 7 different kinds of intelligence. Some of these are the same kinds of intelligence that are measured by traditional IQ tests. For example, in Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, one form of intelligence he calls linguistic intelligence. This is verbal ability, and that is one of the abilities that's measured by all of the traditional IQ tests. So it's not like he's throwing out the old ideas. He says this is an important form of intelligence. It is an ability that's necessary to be successful in a lot of the kinds of classes that kids are going to take in elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. So yeah, let's keep measuring it. Let's call that linguistic intelligence, verbal ability. But what makes Gardner's theory different from most is the fact that he says, in addition to linguistic intelligence, we should be measuring additional kinds of intelligence as well. Here are some of the non-traditional forms of intelligence that Gardner says that we should be measuring. And yes, do take notes on this. Some of the non-traditional forms of intelligence included in Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. We should be measuring what Gardner calls bodily kinesthetic intelligence. Now that's a term you don't use every day. What does that mean? Using one's body to make something or solve a problem. To be successful in the martial arts, you've got to be good at bodily kinesthetic intelligence. If you're going to be on the wrestling team in college, you need to know all the different moves that can be made, what kind of counter moves to make, how to get out of a specific position that you find yourself in. If you're good at picking up those kinds of skills, then you score high on bodily kinesthetic intelligence. Use one's body to make something or solve a problem. Here's another form of intelligence that is included in Gardner's theory that's not given much attention in traditional theories of intelligence. How about interpersonal intelligence? Interpersonal intelligence is the ability to perceive and understand other people. Ability to perceive and understand other people. If you're going to be a counselor, you had better be good at this. You're talking to a 12-year-old adolescent about problems that she's having in school. You need to be able to hear the words that she says and process what they mean. But you better also be good at interpreting nonverbal cues. She's slouched in her seat and she doesn't make eye contact with you. What does that mean? Is that just her normal way of behaving, or does it communicate she's very uncomfortable with this topic you're talking about right now? If you're able to sort those kinds of things out, you would score high on interpersonal intelligence. Ability to perceive and understand other people. That kind of skill is not directly assessed by the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale. It is included in Gardner's theory. And one last example of a non-traditional form of intelligence measured in Gardner's theory, intrapersonal intelligence. And note, that's not a repeat of the preceding item. The preceding item was interpersonal intelligence. Now I'm talking about intrapersonal intelligence. Intra means within. If you score high on intrapersonal intelligence, That means you have high-level ability to understand your own needs and abilities. This is the kind of intelligence that you college students need to develop over the next few years. When you graduate, you're going to have to choose your first occupation to go into. Is your personality and your abilities consistent with this one specific occupation that you've been thinking about? This is an occupation that involves working with people a lot, talking to people that you haven't met before, starting up conversations and turning brief acquaintances into better relationships. Are you good at that kind of thing? You had better be able to assess yourself and know your own abilities and skills. Among other things, it'll help you sort out what's the best kind of career for you to go into as your first career. That's intrapersonal intelligence. Questions there? We are going to have time to see a short video. I've got a little 5-minute video that I want to see. Portion of a TED Talk. This guy is actually a regular on TED Talks. Type his name into the TED website and you'll see that he's made more than one TED Talk. He's something of an expert in his field. He is Sir Ken Robinson. Title of this video is Do Schools Kill Creativity? We're just going to see a portion of it. This portion of his talk is very much relevant to these ideas of Gardner's theory that I've been talking about. He doesn't address Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences directly, but he's clearly a proponent of that kind of approach to thinking about intelligence. The speaker, Sir Ken Robinson, describes problems in school being experienced by a woman named Gillian Lynn when she was a young girl. As is usually the case with my videos, you can assume there'll be a question on the upcoming test pertaining to it. If you can answer this question, you'll be able to handle my test question okay. Potential question related to the video. Think about the different types of intelligence associated with Gardner's theory that I just lectured on. I lectured on 4 of them. Of those 4, which type of intelligence would this girl probably score high on? Of the 4 kinds of intelligence that I described, bodily, kinesthetic, interpersonal, intrapersonal, linguistic intelligence, which type of intelligence would this girl that Ken Robinson talks about in his video probably score high on? Let's cross our fingers and hope the sound works okay. I tried it out here in class and the sound works fine here in the classroom. If you can hear it okay at home, you don't need to say anything. But if you don't hear it, post to that effect on the panel. Tell me I could not hear the sound on the video. I'm optimistic that it's going to work okay. This is a short clip. It's about 5 minutes in length. As you listen to it, look for the answer to my question. And after the video, we'll talk about the answer to my question.
And the third thing about intelligence is it's distinct. I'm doing a new book at the moment called Epiphany, which is based on a series of interviews with people about how they discovered their talent. I'm fascinated by how people got to be there. It's really prompted by a conversation I had with a wonderful woman who most people have never heard of. She's called Gillian Lynn. Have you heard of her? Some have. She's a choreographer and everybody knows her work. She did Cats and Phantom of the Opera. She's wonderful. I used to be on the board of the Royal Ballet in England, as you can see. And Anyway, Jill and I had lunch one day. I said, how do you get to be a dancer? And she said it was interesting. When she was at school, she was really hopeless. And the school in the 30s wrote to her parents and said, we think Gillian has a learning disorder. She couldn't concentrate. She was fidgeting. I think now they'd say she had ADHD. Wouldn't you? But this was the 1930s, and ADHD hadn't been invented, at this point, so it wasn't an available condition. People weren't aware they could have that. Anyway, she went to see this specialist. So this oak panel room, and she was there with her mother, and she was led and sat on this chair at the end, and she sat on her hands for 20 minutes while this man talked to her mother about all the problems Gillian was having at school. And at the end of it, because she was disturbing people, their homework was always late and so on, little kid of 8, in the end, the doctor went and sat next to Gillian and said, Gillian, I've listened to all these things that your mother's told me. I need to speak to her privately. So she said, wait here, we'll be back. We won't be very long. And they went and left her. But as they went out the room, he turned on the radio that was sitting on his desk. And when they got out of the room, he said to her mother, just stand and watch her. And the minute they left the room, she said she was on her feet, moving to the music. And they watched for a few minutes, and he turned to her mother, and he said, Mrs. Lynn, Gillian isn't sick, she's a dancer. Take her to a dance school. I said, what happened? He said, she did. I can't tell you how wonderful it was. We walked in this room, and it was full of people like me. People who couldn't sit still. People who had to move to think. Who had to move to think. They did ballet, they did tap, they did jazz, they did modern, they did contemporary. She was eventually auditioned for the Royal Ballet School. She became a soloist. She had a wonderful career at the Royal Ballet. She eventually graduated from the Royal Ballet School, found her own company, the Gillian Dance Company, met Andrew Lloyd Webber. She's been responsible for some of the most successful musical theatre productions in history. She's given pleasure to millions, and she's a multi-millionaire. Somebody else might have put her on medication and told her to calm down. Now, I think... What I think it comes to is this. Al Gore spoke the other night about ecology and the revolution that was triggered by Rachel Carson. I believe our only hope for the future is to adopt a new conception of human ecology, one in which we start to reconstitute our conception of the richness of human capacity. Our education system has mined our minds in the way that we strip mined the earth for a particular commodity, and for the future it won't serve us. We have to rethink the fundamental principles on which we're educating our children. There was a wonderful quote by Jonas Salk who said, if all the insects were to disappear from the earth, within 50 years all life on earth would end. If all human beings disappeared from the earth, within 50 years all forms of life would flourish. And he's right. What TED celebrates is the gift of the human imagination. We have to be careful now that we use this gift wisely and that we avert some of the scenarios that we've talked about. And the only way we'll do it is by seeing our creative capacities for the richness they are and seeing our children for the hope that they are. And our task is to educate their whole being so they can face this future. By the way, we may not see this future, but they will. And our job is to help them make something of it. Thank you very much.
Here, here.
Let's see, our video, Ken Robinson describes problems in school that were experienced by Gillian Lynn when she was a young girl. Your question, which type of intelligence would this girl probably score high on according to Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences? Well, based on the 4 that I described a minute ago, I would say most likely bodily kinesthetic intelligence. Gillian Lynn went on to become a very successful choreographer. She apparently was the first choreographer that did the first version of Cats. which went on to great success on Broadway. Of the 4 types of intelligence that I would describe, it sounds like bodily kinesthetic intelligence is where she would stand. Now, we have more to say about intelligence. We're going to talk about the effect of heredity versus the environment on intelligence. We're going to see that, yes, both of them matter. But I want to handle those topics all together as one bundle. So we'll call an intellecturing for today. The one remaining thing that we have to do today is multiple choice quiz on chapter 12. I'm going to go into Canvas and release it a little bit earlier. You can take a little 5-minute break if you want, or you can get started with that multiple choice quiz that I'm going to release a little bit earlier. I'll put a sign up indicating what time I'm going to make it available. It'll be about 5 minutes from now. Once you click it, you'll still have your usual amount of time. You'll have 45 minutes to complete the thing once you begin. Any questions here in the room before we go to break? A 5-minute break, and I'll get that multiple choice quiz available in a minute. Okay, as you can see on the screen, I've made the multiple choice quiz available as of 1:28. That's about 60 seconds from now. And once you begin it, you'll have your usual 45 minutes to complete it. And that is all that we're doing for the rest of today. No more lecturing or anything after today. Once you're done with the quiz, we're done with this class meeting and done with the week. Have a good weekend. I'll pick up with lecturing on intelligence when we get together on Monday. Pick up with lecturing on Have a good weekend. You too.
Thank you. It's informed by two other places in the brain.